This is an extract from the Leader Coronavirus Daily podcast by the Evening Standard and hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for it on your podcast provider.
The Russian Federation, the United Kingdom and Spain remain among the top 10 countries around the world reporting the most cases in the past 24 hours.
The World Health Organization's Dr. Hans Kluge sounded almost angry, giving an update on the continuing spread of coronavirus and the complacency from some in the public he says creates a playground for Covid-19.
Reports of distrust in authorities and conspiracy thinking are fueling movements against social and physical distancing. Mistrust, resistance to measures, a disregard for the behavioral changes we have all made to limit Covid-19 will send us down the road no one of us want to take.
His frustration is clear, but then again, so is the public's at what some perceive to be a slow, sometimes confusing response from authorities. Everyone's waiting for a turning point, and in the UK, one may have arrived. An antibody test that's nearly 100% accurate, and which our editorial column says could make the difference the country's looking for.
No scientists have ever worked under such public pressure. Hour by hour, progress and setbacks in the fight against coronavirus are ripped apart on social media. When the world is waiting for tests, treatments, cures and preventive vaccines, the pressure on medical researchers to shortcut essential trials and checks is immense. That makes genuine breakthroughs all the more important. One of them seems to have come. Public Health England has approved an antibody test that should help to determine how many people have caught and recovered from coronavirus. What it will not show is what kind of immunity, if any, those antibodies give people. The potential is obvious though. If you know you have already had coronavirus and are much less likely to catch it again, if at all, then you might not need to stick to lockdown and social distancing.
The test won't be available to the public for a while, but it is being sent to health workers. And I'm joined now over Zoom by Professor Danny Altmann from the British Society for Immunology. Professor Altmann, the government's calling this a game changer. Is it?
I think it's a game changer rather than the game changer. So it's assumed enormous, perhaps disproportionate prominence because it's taken so long to get on board with so many false starts. I do think, however, that it is important because it's the only way we've really got of being sure how far this virus has spread and how many people in the country have seen it. And that's a big answer.
What is an antibody test? How do they actually work? What do they discover? What do they not discover?
So all the time in your body, every day, you're meeting stuff from the outside world, bacteria that you breathe down your nose, viruses that people sneeze over you, you name it. And if you're not going to be overrun by that, your immune system, your white blood cells need to recognize it. And when I say recognize it, what do I mean by that? One of the key things that I mean is that your white blood cells need to make an antibody to it. So that antibody is a chemical, if you like, that's measurable in your blood that says that you've met that virus or you've met that bacteria or whatever it is. Most antibodies, as we know from vaccines, last for a variable period, certainly a number of years. So they're a kind of footprint, if you like, of where you've been and what you've seen and what you've made an immune response to.
So it can show if you've had COVID-19. But if somebody has had the infection, are they then immune from it?
No, I think it's a really key point, and again, a point of quite a lot of grey area confusion. So simply having a plus result on an antibody test might not equal being immune next time you meet it. Perhaps you need a certain amount of antibody. Perhaps it's not antibodies you need at all. Perhaps it's some other aspect of your immune response. So it doesn't equal being protected. It equals having seen it.
So when we talk about things like health passports that'll show that you're healthy enough to go back to work, is that a practical thing at all?
Well, I think it's an interesting proposal, but really, really difficult in so many ways. So I think the way that I think about this, if with my professor's hat on, I was sitting on a grant panel and somebody wanted a load of money to develop antibody passports as an idea, I probably wouldn't fund them because there's too many things about the idea that don't work and might not play out. Does antibody equal protection? Does antibody this year equal antibody next year? If it doesn't equal antibody next year, because it might wane very fast, do I need to issue these passports every 6 months? If I issue them to somebody and they're not carefully handled, and it means that person can't get health insurance or can't get a mortgage or can't get a job, am I responsible for that? It raises so many questions.
And it also raises more confusion, as you were talking about earlier. I think what people want is to be told, yes, you can go back to work, or no, you can't. Can we ever be in a position to guarantee, yes, this person can go back to work without spreading COVID-19?
I just think that it's very hard to know. And for my part, I feel like our kind of confidence to go back into a kind of crowded pub in the West End will need to kind of creep back with the fullness of time, as we think, well, we've seen a lot of laboratory experiments that say if you've got this much antibody on board or this many white blood cells on board against the virus, on average, you'll be safe. And at the same time as knowing that actually your statistical chance of being shoulder to shoulder with somebody in that pub who has the virus has gone down to 1 in 5,000 or whatever it is. So if in my mind I could put together favourable odds, I'd go back into that pub. But that'll come in the fullness of time very slowly.
Yeah, very slowly. I think that might be the issue there. Realistically, how long before a vaccine appears, I presume, are we going to have to live with having to take a gamble about going back to the pub?
Yeah, I think it'll be sort of piecemeal increments, won't it? Because as PCR testing ramps up, we'll have a better and better idea how many cases there are lurking out there in the community and how likely the chances are, the person next to you in the pub has it. Meanwhile, I think it is realistic that we'll have a bit more confidence in the antivirals that are available in our hospitals, so that it won't feel like this kind of Russian roulette gamble. If you got it, you'll think, well, if I go to hospital, there's a good chance they might be able to treat me. We'll get better answers from the antibody testing. We won't know whether the antibody is definitely protective, but we'll know whether 5, 10 or 25% of our population have some kind of immunity. And I think somehow putting all those facts together in the way that we assess risk every day of our lives, when you choose whether to cross the road in the path of a bus or not, we'll be able to kind of put together those odds and work out how we feel about life. 6 months from now, we'll feel better than now. And 12 months from now, we'll feel better than that.
And finally, just as a scientist, are you feeling the pressure from the public just now, this unique situation where you're having to address all of these different issues under what can't be optimum working conditions for laboratories all over the world?
I think it is pressure. And, and I think, some of my colleagues, the people, for example, in various countries who are at the front end of vaccine production and vaccine testing and optimization and development, have enormous pressure on them because, normally a vaccine answer would evolve in increments over, years and decades, and that's been foreshortened to 4 or 5 months. And the pressure is absolutely enormous. So I certainly feel for them. For the rest of us, I kind of feel like it's what we do and what we're here for, and what we get excited by. It's it's like asking the bus drivers to drive the buses. The answer is people feel that's what they were trained to do and they get on with it.
Search for the Leader Coronavirus Daily on any podcast provider to hear more from the podcast.